Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Clemens and Mr. Marshall, though he's here in spirit, and this is U.S. History Flipped. Alright guys, so what we're going to be talking about today is the Progressive Era. And so the Progressive Era is really awesome. It's the time period that happens after the Industrial Revolution in the United States, where they're trying to clean up a lot of the messes that happen from industrialization. And I love this time period because I like it when you try to fix problems. So we're talking about 1900 to 1920. And our animation that's going to let us know if we're writing is the little happy, smiley, sunny face. All right. So let's talk about why they wanted to reform. And so this is a little bit of a review here, but definitely need to deal with some of these business practices that were happening. First off, you've got monopolies, where one company is controlling everything. And,
hey everybody, once again, it's
so it's
Mrs.
squeezing out other
and
companies,
Mr. Marshall, and this is U.S. History
as a result, what's happening is the companies that are left,
what
they
we
charge
are
whatever they want
talk
because
about
there's no competition.
Reform.
And who gets
This is
hurt?
part
It's the
3
consumer.
of
It's the people like you and me that are buying things.
about the major reform
The other thing that's going on is
trying to deal
natural
with the
resources.
from the Industrial Revolution.
You know, this is the time where,
so
you know,
we talked about muckrakers, we've talked about all the different laws that were passed, and now, right now, we're going to talk about
doing
the 3
progressive presidents.
So our first
progressive president is
polluting the
Mr.
air.
Theodore
It's
Roosevelt.
really bad.
And so definitely
like
something
to
that needed to be worked
name
on.
their programs.
The people
And
that
so
are
the program
working
he called
in all these
he
places
created
are
was
definitely
called
not
the
doing very
Square
well
Deal.
either.
And
so we've
I
talked
honestly,
a bunch about
I love
this,
Theodore
that they're
Roosevelt.
working
He's one of my
really
super
long
faves.
hours for
I
really
could talk
low
about him all
pay.
day. He's
That
actually our
things are
youngest
very unsafe.
president.
There's a lot of
He became
accidents
president
that are
after
happening.
McKinley was assassinated.
When
he was
people are
42
trying
years
to form
old.
unions,
Kennedy
either being
was
shut
our
down
youngest
or people are
elected
being
president
fired,
at the age of 43.
or when the unions are trying to have strikes.
A ton of kids.
A lot of violence
who
is
all
happening,
had really cool
which we
names.
talked about before,
And,
things like Haymarket or
and
the
he
Great
was
Railroad
just
Strike.
he was pretty awesome.
And then the
He
people
had a
that are
bunch of
living in the
achievements.
cities and working
And
in these
so
factories,
we're going to talk about them.
Not
One thing
he definitely was very much influenced by
but
the
then when they're
writers,
coming home,
of the
they're
era,
living
the
these
muckrakers.
tenements that
He was actually
are
friends
just
with a bunch of them from his
terrible,
time when
very
he was
unsafe,
police
disease-ridden. There's
and governor
all kinds
of
of
New York.
crimes.
And so
Things are just
so yeah, he was really
not
big
going
in helping
well.
to put
So
through
it's great that
the
we
Pure Food and
have
Drug
this
Act
time
and the Meat
period where
Inspection
they're
Act,
working on trying
which
to
we've
fix
now
things.
talked about. This is our
And
third
so
time talking
this is
about
just a
them.
neat little chart that kind of
Definitely
shows
a huge
some of the
result
goals
of
of progressivism.
Upton Sinclair's
So,
jungle.
He also worked on regulating
a lot of the
business.
labor groups want to restrict immigration,
strengthening the Interstate Commerce Commission,
and trying to make it so that they wouldn't
trying to get rid of
accept
monopolies,
bribes, that they would have a maximum rate, so that they would charge people equally,
trying to get women the right to vote,
and not say, oh, well, you're a big business friend, we'll charge you less, we'll charge farmers more.
With
really important
machines that are happening.
And so we have our first multiple choice question
for
the section. Remember, you can go back and you can pause.
Become part of society.
Other stuff that he was big with was trust busting. He was known as the trust buster, even though Taft busted more trusts.
Overall,
Teddy Roosevelt was the trust buster. And so his thing was, listen, there are some trusts
what you guys
that
are going
good
to have
trusts,
is
they
5
need
multiple
restraint,
choice
and then
that
there
you're
are
gonna
bad
answer
trusts
throughout this.
that need to
And
be
so if you want, you can pause it
broken
right
up.
here,
And
and
so
you
he
can,
saw that difference. He wasn't just
look at this
completely
question.
opposed
The answer
to
sheet
them.
is
one of the
on
major
back.
cases that happens during his presidency is and very much influenced by him is Northern
answer sheet
Securities
is right
versus
on
the
the back of
United
your
States, which
right,
broke
so
up
muckrakers.
this major monopoly
Muckrakers
of
are
beef,
the people
oil, and
that are
tobacco,
digging through all the junk in society,
which also
to
happened
figure
later.
out
Sorry,
what's going
Northern
on and
Securities
to
is not that,
expose
but,
the bad stuff
to be
everyone
broken up
else.
under the Sherman Antitrust
So you can see
Act,
I've
which
got
is
a
just
mucky kind of
this is the
nasty,
first
muddy
time that this
background
happened. He
these
ends up
guys are
breaking up,
journalists.
like I said.
Some of them are writers, some of them are
trusts
photographers,
too,
some of them are artists.
It was great.
Some of them are
It helped improve
novelists.
competition and
so
lower prices.
these guys are.
So we have our next multiple choice question, which you can pause right here and do. Remember
that's
the
happening
answer
in
sheet
society,
from back
so
of your
that
writing notes.
the government
he also
be pressured to take some action
in terms of dealing with labor. Previously, what had happened
this political cartoon.
People go on strike, and the government would say, we're in favor of the business, we're not in favor of the worker. And one of the major things he did was there was a major coal strike, and
just trying
this was just bad news because coal was needed to not only power
and then we
everything,
have our
but
next
also
multiple
heat
choice
things.
question. Again, you can pause it here and put the answer on the back of your notes packet.
So there was a major crisis looming, and so instead of just calling troops and saying workers get back to work,
now,
or we'll
here's how
hire
I'm
somebody
definitely
else.
going to really be able to
He
tell
actually invited
that
the
you're
labor
listening
leaders
and paying
and
attention
the coal
and not just writing things down randomly
to the White House.
Please, I left it out on your notes
packet.
Please write down the books
solve their issues
that these guys wrote.
What that showed was, hey, government can get
really
involved
important
if it's
because our good
for
friend
public
Allegiance
welfare.
definitely references this. So
He
our first
also
guy is
helped
Jacob
to
Rees,
get
and
pushed through
he wrote a book
laws
called
that
How the Other Half Lives.
Started accident
And so
insurance for
what
workers,
he,
so you get your arm lopped off,
about,
and it wouldn't be
was
just
life
that you're
in
now going to be
the
homeless
tenements
or
in New York City.
panhandling,
And so
that
he
there might
took
be
a
some
ton
help for
of
you.
photographs.
He also
really,
tried
really
to reduce
exposed what was
working
going
hours,
on,
and so we
that
have the
people
case of
could
Mueller
see
versus
how
Oregon, which
everyone's
did limit
living,
working hours for
in their
women.
own city. So as a result, you get a bunch of reforms,
different
overall
than
raising
Lochner
awareness
versus
about
New York,
poverty.
which said men,
and
they
then
don't get the limited
public
working hours.
safety sorts of things like building codes.
The
fire
other thing
escapes,
that he was very, very passionate
hoping
about,
that
Teddy Roosevelt was a
prevent some
hunter,
sort of
and so
easy deaths.
you might be kind of wondering, like,
the
why
next
is a
guy is
hunter
Frank Norris. He
trying,
wrote a book
why
called
does he care about the
Octopus?
environment?
And
Well,
so
he's not going to have
his
stuff
book
to
was about
hunt
railroad
if
monopolies,
all the land
and,
is gone and all the animals
as a result
have
of
gone
this,
extinct. So
what
he was very, very big
the
about
Interstate
setting
Commerce
aside
Commission
land.
that we talked
And
about
so,
previously that we said really
he
wasn't
helped to
working very
expand
well.
Yellowstone, Yosemite,
Definitely improved.
other
They were
major
able to get some more teeth and more
national parks around the country. And
so here you can see
Yosemite.
one of Jacob Rees's pictures
because I've been to
of
Yellowstone.
some of the
Let's call that
dilapidated
Yellowstone.
buildings.
I think it is.
Here, really
all right, so we have our
famous
next multiple
picture
choice
of,
question.
these
Remember,
little
you can
kids that
pause, rewind,
are
go
living in
back
a
if you need to help you out.
All right,
so then our
next,
second
so we
progressive
have
president
Ida
was William
Tarbell,
Howard
and she wrote a
Taft.
book called The
Poor
History of
Taft,
Standard Oil.
Here he is,
and so this
he
is
gets
talking
known
about
today as
the
being
bad
the
things that Standard
most
Oil is doing,
pleasantly plump president
as a monopoly.
But
talking about
this guy is awesome. Not only was he president, he was
so the reforms
Chief
that we
Justice
get
of
with
the
this
Supreme Court,
is
Speaker of the House.
again we talked about previously
the
Sherman
dominator
Antitrust
of
Act, but it
the various
wasn't
branches of government.
Very effective.
So even though he
on.
busted
now,
double the trusts,
they're
as
starting
Teddy
to
Roosevelt,
enforce it.
he's
and
not
so what
known
we
as
end
the
up
trust
getting
buster.
is
He's
a
kind of
Supreme Court
seen
case that
as
Mr. Marshall's actually going to talk
weak,
about in
and
part two.
Roosevelt
Roosevelt
saw him as rolling back some of the awesome work that he felt he had done. And so what ends up happening is the Republican Party, which is the party of Teddy Roosevelt and Taft,
and so this is about
ends up getting
going on in the
and so when we have the election of
so
1912,
as a result,
we end up with three major candidates. So you've got William Howard Taft as the Republican. He's running for re-election. You've got Woodrow Wilson that's running as a Democrat. And then you have Teddy Roosevelt. Now, the actual name of the party was the Progressive Party, but what ends up happening is somebody, a newspaper person is interviewing him and saying, hey, how do you feel? You know, you're back from retirement, you're running for president again.
Even right now, if you're kind of
happier than a bull
what is
moose.
this?
And
That's
so
fine. Mr. Marshall's going to go for it.
And so it becomes known as the Bull Moose Party.
So we have a political cartoon now, even though this is
not the greatest election.
That Frank Norris is talking about. This is talking about
first off, somebody tries to assassinate Teddy Roosevelt.
The idea
is able to survive
because
he
was
has
really big
in his pocket his glasses case and his very thick
with all the tentacles.
And even though he's shot very close to the heart, he gives his speech that lasts over an hour afterwards.
I really like this cartoon. You definitely see it.
But like I said, it splits the Republican
this one
Party
is talking about political bosses.
Teddy Roosevelt ends up taking votes away
from Taft.
a little bit
before this time,
and so as a result, Woodrow Wilson wins.
And
so this is one of those themes we actually talk about again when we get to the 1992 election, the 2000 election.
Again,
is a lot of times third parties end up splitting the vote. So again, it was actually the Republican Party in '92 that happened.
Our next person,
so Woodrow Wilson becomes our third
one people remember the most is Upton Sinclair.
Woodrow Wilson also gets a bunch of reforms
so this was talking about conditions
he
in the
lowers
industry.
the tariff for the first time since the Civil War, which
totally
makes people really happy
might
because that means
into a vegetarian.
the prices are going to go down for goods. It makes some of the industrialists unhappy, though, because they're saying, well, now people might buy foreign goods which instead of buying American goods.
We need to actually inspect this.
But
we need to make sure
Woodrow
that
Wilson's
the
trying to help
food
out the
isn't
consumers,
spoiled.
trying to
We
help
need
out
to
you
make
and
sure
me.
that there isn't rat
Also,
poison in it.
we
need to
end
make
up
sure that
getting
there's
an
not
amendment that
parts of
starts the
rats
income
in it.
tax. It's a
And the Food
graduated
and Drug
income
Act
tax, which
basically
means
saying
that the higher your income, the higher your
companies can't make
taxes.
false claims about what their
And then
specific
also
medicines
he
will
helps to
cure.
start
You
the
can't just
Federal
say you're gonna
Reserve
cure,
System. Now, the
cancer
Federal
or
Reserve
something
System
when the
is
main
our
ingredient in
national
your
bank,
medicine is
essentially,
alcohol.
today. And
All right,
so, remember we
here's
talked
your
about it
number
with
three
Alexander
question.
Hamilton
And
starting
again,
it
remember with these
way
multiple
back in the
choice, we need to
1790s.
rewind and look back.
This
You
is
definitely-
different. It's
the answers
organized
are pretty
differently.
clear.
But
So here's the cover of the jungle.
the Federal
here's
Reserve is
here's a
definitely
picture
something that
inside the meat,
today has
meat
a
packing
huge
plant.
impact
And like I
on our
said, it was
economy
just totally
because they
disgusting.
regulate the flow
Sawdust
of
in the
money, and they
food,
do
rat
that by
parts,
raising
rat
and lowering
feces.
interest rates.
Gross.
So when they lower
If you want
interest
to pause
rates,
and
it
just,
makes
if you're
more
that
money
kind of person,
available.
you
So
want to
think about
pause
if you
it
have a
and
credit card
actually
and
read
they
this.
lower your interest rate, well, now maybe your
pretty
payment's
gross.
going to be less, or
So,
they lower your
enjoy.
interest rate on your car payment.
All
or
right,
your
and we have
mortgage.
another multiple
Your
choice
payments
question.
are going to be
Again,
less, so you're
can
going to
go
have
back
more
and
money
look at
available.
your notes if you need help with that.
And so sometimes that can
Some
cause
general forms
inflation.
that are
So what
going
they'll
on.
do on
Remember
the
we were
other
talking
side
about poverty
is to regulate money is they might raise interest
and
rates,
so,
which
yeah,
will make your
they're
payments go
trying to
up,
make things
which will
better
decrease
so
the
that,
amount of money that's
improve
going out,
sanitation to help,
and then thus
to help
lower
decrease
inflation.
disease.
So the
We talked
Federal
about
Reserve is
settlement
still
houses.
around
Remember, we
today,
talked about Jane
and still
Addams and the Hull House in
extremely
Chicago.
important
So that's
to how
that
our
was spreading
economy
around the
functions.
country. Also,
in terms of
improvements
business
for women's
regulation,
rights,
we get sort of
women
the
got
Sherman
right to vote
Antitrust
in
Act
the 19th Amendment
2.0 with the
improving
Clayton
women's
Antitrust
education.
Act, which is
Women's
working to
colleges have been
strengthen the
around, but now
government's
there was
power
more of them,
to
and there were
regulate
more co-ed
monopolies,
colleges.
which is great.
So,
this
women
is
were allowed to go to
a
college with
massive
men,
improvement.
which was really great.
What you'll notice on the
Now,
regions
here's
is a lot of
something-
times they'll put the two of them together.
The one
Just
thing
remember,
that I
anytime
really
you
find
see
depressing
antitrust,
is
we're
the
trying to break up
progressive era,
monopolies.
because there's
some
so
other
many
reforms, and there's
that
just so
are
many that
being
ends
made
up
and
happening
things
during
that
his
are trying to be
presidency.
helped. This
Child
is one
labor
where
laws,
they weren't
low
super
interest
successful.
loans for farmers, the 17th
in
Amendment,
terms
and
of improving
17th
rights for
Amendment you
African
probably talked
Americans.
about in part
So,
2 of this.
we're definitely
They're
talking about
direct
these four
election of
folks,
senators.
and they're definitely, they were working.
So
and
here's a
really,
multiple
really
choice
hard
question.
and stuff.
Remember, you can
But in
pause,
terms of being
rewind, and go
successful
back and
at
look
that
at that.
point in time, they really
and
weren't.
we
But
have
they did
another
set the
multiple choice
stage
question
for,
that you
for
can
later
also pause,
with, the
rewind,
civil rights
and look
movement.
back at.
So you have Booker T. Washington, and the way I always remember the difference, because the Regents likes to ask you the difference between Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois. So in my head, I say the T stands for training, because he's very big on vocational training. What he said was, or what his belief was, that it was really going to be difficult for blacks and whites to be equal socially, but if they can be economically equal, or at least that blacks can have more economic opportunity by having training, that would improve things. Now, W.E.B. Du Bois, he's different. And so I always, in my head, I think of the E as equaling equality. That he said, no, you know what, blacks and whites should be completely equal socially, politically, economically. And so he helped create the NAACP. The NAACP stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And this is still around today. It's a very powerful organization. And so he created this organization, helped to create this organization, and definitely all about total equality. Now, Marcus Garvey is different from these guys. Marcus Garvey is definitely more radical. He said blacks and whites really cannot work together, that there should be just, he kind of was in favor of segregation, to the point that he even sponsored some Back to Africa kinds of movements. So definitely much more radical. And then Ida B. Wells Barnett, she spoke out against lynching. And now, we talked about lynching when we were doing Reconstruction. This is still a problem here in the early 1900s. And so she's trying to get laws passed to prevent it. The problem is she's not successful. They were unable to pass those laws. And so clockwise, here's Booker T. Washington. I actually should have mentioned, he went on to form the Tuskegee Institute, and we'll talk more about them when we get into World War II. Here's W.E.B. Du Bois. Here's Marcus Garvey, and here's Ida B. Wells Barnett. All right, and so then we have our last multiple choice question. And remember, you can always pause, rewind, go back, and look at that. All right, folks, so that finishes us up for part 1. Tune in for part 2 with Mr. Marshall.